the man who predicted the hot swap summer, Jason Calacanis.
Hot swap summer's here. Anybody can come. You got Dean Phillips coming back. And you have Gavin up there and Whitmer, the crazy crystal lady.
Marianne, let's go.
I love her. Get her in there. I'm going to defeat Trump with love.
My word?
Sure, why not? Cast a spell. Because think about what an advantage it is to hot swap. It's a free option. None of us knew that Joe's cognitive decline was happening, and he made a choice for himself and his family, and we're just responding to that reality. We wish we weren't in this situation, and we wish Joe the best, and we're celebrating Joe, and this Democratic primary is a tribute to his 50 years in politics. I mean, I do things for the lulz. It's going to be a great hot swap summer.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. We've got Brandon back after, just weeks away. The world was waiting for you. They're happy you're back. I'm happy you're back. Sanjana was happy you're back. We were gone for a full week as a full team. In that week, America became a year older. I became a year older. And the Democratic Party has completely collapsed into a state of utter chaos. We have to start there. I think right before we left, I'm pretty sure we were talking about the debate and the debate fallout, Joe Biden, how could we not? Certainly in all of our takes and our writing. Like I said, it was the first meaningful debate in any of our lives, is how I've characterized it before. Certainly going into that, I did not expect to see anything that mattered. And then actually it was the only thing that mattered, right? Now we're looking at something that's more impactful than the entire Republican primary. And in a sort of week or plus that has followed, we've seen a total evolution in the way that the Democrats are reacting to this. First, it was just, tragedy, tears. What are we going to do? Then it was like total panic, hysteria. We've now bifurcated into two camps. You have the Whoopi Goldbergs of the world on The View saying, I will vote for this man even if he shits his pants. This is an actual opinion of hers.
I don't care if he's pooped his pants. I don't care if he can't put a sentence together.
And then like the Paul Krugmans of the world, who is saying in the pages of the New York Times, listen, yes, it's a problem that we have an actual dementia patient who is in the White House right now. And yes, it is going to be really hard to run him against Trump. And yes, he should step down. But if he doesn't, I will never mention the fact that he has dementia again, and we will just vote for him. But then you also have like the George Clooney thing. So Barack Obama is kind of meant to be the behind the scenes puppet master of the anti-Biden crusade. George Clooney is now being used as evidence for this because apparently George and Obama are tight. George just penned an op-ed encouraging Biden to step down. It's funny. I think this one, and maybe we just start here, like Riley proposed a take a couple days, maybe it was yesterday even, about Clooney. And I was like, why? And I just discarded it. I'm like, why are we talking about this? Like, who cares that George Clooney asked President Biden to step down? The Democrats really care.
The fact is that you and I are sitting here today because this will be your last week of employment. This is not an assessment of your productivity. You gotta try not to take this personally.
Well, I just had a bad night.
Like they really, really care. This has been an ongoing, evolving news story, I would say. It's like the significance of George Clooney coming out. But we're now in this place of it is total chaos. There's a giant question of what's going to happen. Later on in this episode, we're going to have a little guest appearance from one Jason Calacanis to talk about the hot swap summer. But we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if Biden's going to step down. We don't know if he is, if the DNC has been plotting his ouster for months and months. A dangerous idea, according to Paul Graham, which we will also talk about a little later on in the episode. But what are you guys just like straight away? What are you making of all the chaos? Or have you been enjoying the chaos? Were you enjoying your break? Sanjana, are you even aware of the chaos? Or are you still just sort of quasi on vacation?
I will admit my friends and I watched some clips of the debate afterward, and it was almost like you had to, I later watched the full thing, but like it felt painful to witness the implosion. People keep bringing up elder abuse kind of like, somewhat mockingly, but it is really, I mean, seeing Biden like stammer his way through that debate, I think was basically as bad as it could have been for the Democrats. And what was interesting was that, like, you know, everything, I think we now have like sort of memory hold that everything was put in place for Biden to excel in that debate. Like all the rules that he had insisted on, that Trump's mic could be cut off, and, you know, that they would have these specific moderators. And Trump really post-debate has just taken the strategy of like not saying anything at all. So it's kind of like they got what they wanted, which is that Trump shuts up, and he's kind of just let, you know, everything spiral into chaos.
But what do you make now, though, of what's going on the DNC side? Like, do you think? I mean, you have Nancy Pelosi coming. Nancy Pelosi's was a pretty funny reaction, I thought. She has been grilled. And of course, up until now, I mean, what if you're a Democrat, what do? You have to just say, of course, we're supporting him until you don't. And then you just get completely, you fall into line, and you support whoever the candidate is. But for now, you have to say you're supporting him because you don't want it to look any weaker than he already looks. And so Pelosi is up there and she's like, they're like, you know, what should happen? And she says, well, I just want whatever he wants to choose, I just want him to choose.
As long as the president it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
That's what they're all saying.
But think about that. Like, he's already chosen. He said publicly, he's like, I am unequivocally going to be. I'm running. You're not going to stop me. I'm the candidate. I'm running. And the Nancy Pelosi in interviews, saying like, you know, whatever he decides, and I'm sure he'll make the right decision eventually. And it's just like this implicit, like, you better make the right decision, pal. The only people actually who seem to be supporting him, there's some people sort of unequivocally, but probably the most prominent unequivocal support is coming, I think, from the squad. So you've seen this rapid pivot from them, from like, this man is complicit in literal genocide, to this is settled. He is running for president and nobody else can. Actually, you've been deep in the squad stuff. I know you're writing a take, or you were thinking about the AOC thing this morning. What do you make of that, actually?
Well, I mean, I think it's like the part of the Democratic Party that is still like vociferously pro-Biden and kind of offended by the suggestion that he should step down, I think sees it as a tactical strategy because they have such a hysterical view of what will happen if Trump will win. Like, this is, you know, you were pointing out this woman yesterday who said on Twitter that, you know, all these white men can come out, like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert can come out on late night and say Biden should step down, but for women of color and immigrants and all these people whose rights, you know, will be eroded, is the way they talk about this, by a Trump presidency. They actually can't, you know, break ranks with Biden because they have to sort of, you know, pursue the candidate who's most likely to beat Trump. And I think that, like, for them, the squad rhetoric is basically, I mean, what you've seen from AOC, who's been, you know, I mean, she was just unendorsed by the DSA for her endorsement of Biden, I guess, and for sort of not being. Is
this because of the Palestine stuff?
I think it's basically because of the Palestine stuff. I mean, the line of thinking is that, like, she is endorsing Biden. Biden is, you know, continuing to arm Israel, and so, you know, AOC is complicit. But I think the way she would, you know, defend it is basically Biden is the person who has the best chance of beating Trump. And so wherever you kind of fall on that calculus seems to be informing sort of, if you're a diehard Democrat, like whether or not you say the obvious about Biden, which is that he's, you know, clearly senile.
Yeah, I saw this. There was a prominent, let's say, right-wing funder who I am in a group chat with, a huge group chat. And he had mentioned this morning, like, there's no disagreement on philosophy here. It's entirely a tactical disagreement that we're watching play out. It is just straight up this. It's just, who do you think has a better chance of winning, Biden or someone else? And we don't quite know. It seems like they've sort of coalesced around Kamala as the alternative. But I don't really know. I also don't know what the rules are exactly. I said earlier, right when as soon as the debate happened, I think it was the morning after, I was like, I can't wait to discover what new rule I never knew existed that's about to determine like who our next presidential candidate on the Democrat side is. And I still think that's going to happen. I still am waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it's going to be something totally bizarre. And then you're going to be treated like an asshole for never knowing it or something. I'm like, oh my God, you just must not pay attention. If you didn't know about the secret, Rule 55 that says Nancy Pelosi herself gets to decide at the convention who's going to win. What the? So you might have noticed Brandon dropped. His internet's exploding. He's rushing to come back. So is Riley. And randomly, we have two new guests on the pod. We got Matt, who you met last time, and the legendary Eric Button, who you've never met before, our director of Opposite Pirate Wires. He has no idea what he's even about to talk about, but we're going to get into it. Sanjana is going to break it down for us until, I don't know, Brandon and Riley maybe pop in the podcast momentarily before even Jason Calacanis. We're talking about Project 2025 because in the sort of chaos and pandemonium of the last, 10 days or whatever since the last, maybe is it a little bit more than that since the debate, randomly, this year-old collection of policy proposals became the hottest political issue in this entire country. It's called Project 2025, and right off the bat, Sanjana, you're going to break it down for us, the bit that you've read. But my feeling is like right off the bat, foreboding title. Like it was not just the hope and change plan of the Trump years, Trump 2.0 or something. It was Project 2025. It sounds like a little bit sci-fi, a little bit dystopian, and certainly that's how it's been framed. But what is let's separate the fact from the fiction. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good starting point because I do think a lot of what has happened here is just bad optics, because it's sort of reminiscent of like the United Nations Project 2031 or whatever, which was their like New World Order plan. You could say it was New World Order. You could just say like, they want to, I don't know, give contraception to people in third world countries, etc. But anyway, that was controversial. So this sort of invokes that. But basically, this is a project by the Heritage Foundation. So it's not actually technically affiliated with the Trump campaign. Heritage Foundation, a very prominent conservative think tank that typically, since the Reagan administration, puts out before an election year a kind of long compendium of policy proposals called the Mandate for Leadership. And so, this is typically, the first edition was like 3,000 pages, I think. It was this like 20 volume, very academic set of policy proposals and, contributions from lots of different conservative academics. Project 2025 is actually several things. It is this policy proposal, which has gotten the most attention, and I can talk about that in a second. But it's also a presidential personnel database that they're compiling. So they're calling it like a right-wing LinkedIn. But basically, they're sort of soliciting applications from people who might be interested in, potentially staffing. I guess they're imagining a Trump administration. And they're compiling, their emails and resumes and that kind of stuff. They have a presidential administration academy training course that they're doing. So they're going to be training people. I mean, it's kind of classic think tank stuff, I think. And they're also releasing a 180-day playbook, which they haven't yet released, I think. But that would basically be sort of the first 100 days of the incoming administration. Here are the policy proposals that we think should be implemented. But, the thing that's gotten focus is their policy agenda, which is over 900 pages. It is a collection, as I said, of like very sort of academic essays with kind of disparate points of view, proposing a bunch of different potential policies for various departments in the government. But, what has really irked a lot of commentators is that some of the initial chapters espouse a very, very strong sort of unified executive theory where they're basically saying, we need to consolidate more power in the executive branch, in the office of the president, the person of the president, and one of the essays in the policy document advocates for essentially abolishing the Federal Reserve, among other things. And then there's, some inflammatory language throughout about potentially jailing pornography producers. But it's a lot of basically very conservative policymakers laying out their vision for the government.
So I guess when I first started clicking into it, it was a few days ago. I think Biden just tweeted, or Biden's handlers, Jill Biden, I don't know who tweets for him, tweeted Google it, Project 2025, Google it. I think it was that either Google Project 2025 or Project 2025, Google it. And so I Googled it, and it was just, first there was the actual link to Project 2025, which seemed totally benign to me. It just seemed like pretty standard right-wing things that I've heard about forever, a little bit disparate, like all different viewpoints, but roughly tethered together in terms of just like, they felt like familiar right-wing things. The most shocking thing I saw was like an anti-abortion pill thing. And I guess now, I didn't even see the porn thing, but that's, I guess, pretty crazy. They weren't even saying to ban it, but they were saying like it's not protected speech. They're making an argument for that. But it was a lot on just the same kind, it's like anti-DEI and like you said, the executive powers, anti-bureaucracy, streamlining law and the tax code. I didn't understand why it was shocking. And my opinion, and they're trying to so all of these pieces are trying to associate this with Trump. There was this sort of sub controversy, which was like, is Trump associated with it or not? And it bloomed out of nowhere. And I didn't understand that, or like why we were even talking about that. So I asked about it online, and then actually one of the authors hit me up. So he says, this is Nathan Lemur. I'm a Project 2025 contributor, helped draft a chapter that was published in the book released last year. And if you remember, Nathan actually was on the show a few months ago to talk about the TikTok ban, to give us a lay of the land in Washington. I had no idea that he was even a part of this until he DM'd me. He said, have continued working as a member of the telecom and AI working groups. There was a realization among conservatives that we were caught flat-footed in 2016 when Trump won. No pipeline for staff, and many agency leaders didn't have a policy plan. 2025 was an idea to equip whoever won in 2025 model ideas and a blueprint that conservatives would like, a wish list, if you will, which is what it seemed like to me. It didn't seem like an actual, Trump platform series of policy proposals or whatever. It just felt like a bunch of conservatives talking about stuff they wanted. And it was framed. I saw a lot of just wild, like, misinformation about this, including again and again. And we kept asking Eric, actually, who is with us in the chat now, kept sharing like summaries from GPT. It was either it was OpenAI's, and then what was the other one that you used?
Perplexity.
And it kept saying shit like they want to ban gay marriage or revoke sort of gay rights. And I'd already known from the other night, working with GPT on this, I kept drilling down, like, where are you getting that from? Like, what specifically where are you finding this? And it's not in, the Project 2025 text. And I think it's actually getting it just from other people writing about it online, which is what this whole conversation has devolved into. It's just people talking about this thing called Project 2025, which they're associating with like the rise of Nazism in this country. They're talking about it as if we've never heard anything like this before. And I actually am failing to hear even one new idea in there, which is maybe my criticism of it. I don't feel like I'm seeing this vision for the future. It feels like sort of standard shit that people have always wanted. And I don't know, I'm kind of at a loss on the Project 2025 fear mongering. Don't quite get it. Someone did say something interesting, which was like, maybe it's the fact that there is a plan at all. That's what's scaring people. There wasn't. Trump's a kind of chaotic guy, right? And all of a sudden, if this is his plan, if he's really going to go in there and start, I guess, doing policies that conservatives have always been asking for literally my entire life, I mean, maybe that would be scary, but one, I don't think that's going to happen. And two, I guess I can't get over the fact that people are, I still can't sort of stop reacting to the reaction, which felt like it was at like level 9. It still is. I mean, people are still talking about this, and there's just nothing new in there. Unless I'm missing something. Brandon, what do you think?
I think the Biden campaign is desperate for some sort of comms victory right now, and that if they can get people to believe that Project 2025 is a democracy ending plan, that they'll have a sort of platform or a position that will essentially keep them in the race. I think right now they're just desperately calling for something that'll, sort of keep the sharks at bay, which includes like MSNBC, obviously George Clooney, like everybody has turned against the Biden campaign. So I think they're in kind of like DEFCON level 5, trying anything they possibly can to get to stick. And sort of end game stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think Brandon's right. I think there's two things happening here where the left cannot really keep attacking Trump because Trump over the last 6 months has just steadily drifted toward the center. He's giving them just like less surface area to attack. So it's like, what's the next best thing we can do is go to the people in MAGA that are actually more hard right is a new term than Trump. So that seems kind of obvious. The other thing is just a note about the name. All like the evil stuff in this world starts with project and then something else. It's like Project Texas, which was the TikTok like thing where they were trying to hide some shit. You had Project Nimbus. It was wasn't that like the Google thing that people tried to quit over? So it's like terrible optics played by the conservatives.
It just gives conspiracy theory kind of,
it does.
right?
Yeah, it does. It is. I think I really believe, and this whole thing does feel. This is Blue Anon. They want Biden. Not even that. I'm going to get specific. Biden and Biden's camp. I mean, Biden doesn't know about this, but Biden's campaign handlers want you to Google this because they know it's going to lead you down a crazy rabbit hole of wild shit. Mark Hamill, the Luke Skywalker guy, or the guy who played Luke Skywalker, and now he's just a full-time, like hysterical cat mom. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. And he shares this this flyer that has Trump doing like a Nazi. It's not actually a Nazi salute, but it's giving Nazi salute. Like, he's thinking Nazi. And again, Trump has nothing to do with this, has disavowed this, is like, I don't even know who those people are. It is weird, by the way, that you can just play, like some random group of people are like, here's what we want you to do. And then Rachel Maddow can say, how dare you do that, Mr. President? Meanwhile, he's just golfing and like really just loving the Biden. He's not a part of this at all. Anyway, what does it say? It says that Trump is going to end no-fault divorce, complete ban on abortions without exceptions, ban contraceptives, condoms. He's coming for your condoms, Matt. Let's be honest. Additional tax breaks for corporations in the 1%. Well, even a broke clock's right. Twice a day. Higher taxes for the working class. That is funny, by the way. They really believe this. They really believe that that Republicans want to abolish all taxes for rich people and aggressively tax poor people. Like, they genuinely believe that is just crazy. The life that they think is happening. Like, imagine, it must be scary to be an MSNBC cat mom, just waking up every day in this headspace. Eliminations of unions. Also listening, raise the retirement age. We literally actually have to do that. Cut Social Security, cut Medicare, which I thought Biden came out against in the last debate, and the Affordable Care Act. That one's true, and I support it. Raise prescription drug prices. Also funny to think of Trump like, I want AIDS drugs more expensive. Promote and expedite capital punishment. Increase Arctic drilling. It's like, this is like, he wants to just be bashing seals over the head. It's in there. It's point number 75. Anyway, the project quote tweets this and just goes through piece by piece by piece. And it's like, we didn't say this. We didn't say this. We don't mean this. Like, and so at that point, I don't know, man, like what even, it's really just all that's really happening here. The for sure thing that I'm taking out of the whole project and what seems to be the most concrete prescription is a firing of civil servants. Like, it's like a thinning of the government. He does want to abolish the Department of Education and various other departments. That's something that sounds radical only if you don't know anything about American history and think that this is some important, like, what abolish Department of Education means we're getting rid of public education, right? Wasn't it created under, I think it was Jimmy Carter. Like, this is a brand new department that is just like full of bureaucrats that you don't need. And that's kind of what we're talking about, which leads me to the maybe strange question of like, is that actually just what they're afraid of?
I mean, I think that's why they were so hysterical over the Chevron decision. I mean, right. they sort of like, they being a sort of specific kind of person on the left, because I don't think it's everyone who really values the image of like an expert civil servant who, you know, has this kind of technical expertise that they often like to talk about. And I do think that I think there's a sense that like politicians do some kind of policy making, like they should be responsible for sort of like some form of lawfare. And then we should have really this kind of like technocratic bureaucrat class that regulates and sort of, you know, restricts the excesses of like an uneducated general public. I think that's a pretty widespread belief. And so they see Trump, I think they see, any attempt to sort of like, you know, curb the Federal Reserve or the FCC or something as, you know, despotic and totalitarian. I mean, those are the words that they keep using.
I think it all falls in line with this, like, Trump is literally Hitler thing, the democracy's on the ballot thing. He's going to get rid of all these norms and services that we have in the government. I mean, what was the New Republic that wrote about, like, they put Trump as like Hitler on the cover of it? Like, they're still running that campaign about he's like going to end the world. And so if that's what you believe in, then like all these little things sort of add up to the amalgam of like, he's ruining everything and going to take over as a dictator.
This, in light of what, I mean, Sanjana, you brought it up in Slack today, and Eric, you just raised it in the pod. Like, compared to the fact that Trump appears to be moderating is especially interesting. He, on abortion, every time Kamala is like, Trump said he would ban abortion, these are like straight up, they're just straight up lies. I mean, he is repeatedly being pressed on this. And honestly, like, is it surprising to anybody that Trump doesn't care about abortion? That's a man who's he's definitely paid for abortions. Like, who are we kidding here? Like, that is not a man who's trying to ban abortion. And then, like, separate from me just having to intuit that, he's said it explicitly again and again and again. He doesn't want a national abortion ban. Is that to say that it's not going to? I mean, who the fuck knows? I didn't think Roe v. Wade was going to happen. So I actually am glad that they codified gay marriage and interracial marriage into law, for example. These are one of the things. This is one of the things that Project 2025 is being framed at. They're saying, you know, he's got to reverse these things. He actually can't. It's a law. You'd have to pass a new law through Congress. This is no longer like, oh, a rogue court can decide. But I don't know. I'm not saying that like crazy things can't happen. We're living in clown world now. The rules are different. But in terms of like fear over what does Trump specifically want, not a lot of, I mean, some of them, yeah, like they're talking about, you know, building the wall as well. I think he said he was going to do that in 2016 though, and he didn't. So like we have two things there. One, you shouldn't be surprised. And two, you should sort of be encouraged. This is not a man who follows through on what he promises. So like, why are you even scared? And I go back and forth at, I between wondering why you're so scared and thinking you can't actually be this scared, right? You can't actually think that he's a Nazi. And that is an answer. I don't know, man. I can't figure out what these people, the really hysterical one, like the Mark Hamills of the world. I don't know. I can't get in there.
I know a lot of them personally. That's what they think. You just can't change their mind. I mean, I literally talked to people the past weekend who would say they would vote for a corpse.
What do you say? Why didn't he, have you asked them why he didn't do these things in 2016?
I probably should have, but I mean, they don't really have an answer.
I asked a guy over the last week. He's a real anti-Trumper. He was going off about Chevron and on Instagram, which, by the way, I have a huge problem with people talking about politics on Instagram and their Instagram story. It's like, keep it fucking funny, light, sexy, bizarre. I don't want to see political shit in there. But it was there, and I was triggered. And I asked some pointed questions. And one of them was this. I was like, why do you think that he didn't do any of this stuff in 2016? If you think he's like, this is quarter who he is. And his response was just, Trump is a rapist. And I'm like, okay, so we're not going to get anywhere.
That's actually the usual thing. They pull the most extreme thing out. So like usually Roe v. Wade is like their kind of way of being like, see, I told you. So they always try to pull the most extreme example out of it.
Dude, I don't get it. This is the least scary election ever. They've both been president already. We know exactly who they are. Like Trump was president, Biden was president. They're not running on anything different. They're running as the exact same. I mean, Biden now has advanced degrees of dementia, but like it's ostensibly the same thing. And it's just the hysteria seems so. It just seems off to me. Like to the point where I really have a hard time even believing it. Whereas that girl, the famous lip screaming after Trump won, I believed that.
What a great honor to be able to introduce for the first time ever anywhere the 45th.
I was like, I believe you. I think that you really do think the world is ending. And I didn't know. I was like, is the world ending? I don't know what just happened. It was weird. 2016 was fucking crazy. But it's 2024. It's not so crazy anymore.
To your point, Trump followed through on maybe half of the stuff. I guess the steel man would be he was blocked by the left from doing what he wanted to do. Like the border wall funding was crazy, which I think is actually a strong case for what Project 2025 is putting out there, where it's like, okay, let's strengthen the office of the president. Let's give him a bit more power. Like, call me crazy, but I wouldn't mind either a leftist or a rightist president getting in there and actually doing shit so that every election actually is consequential. We have 4 years of that. If it sucks, they get voted out. We go back and forth. At least, like, if we're going to spend a whole year every 4 years going crazy, let's at least have some outcomes, right?
Yeah, this is what people are they're worried about, like Bukele. They're like, oh my God, but what if he was sufficiently empowered to the point where he was able to jail all the criminals? That would be this huge civil rights violation. And
his
I think
office looks nice, though.
Well, this is a thing. This is like, we start, everyone starts to just, at that point you have like sort of awkward quiet, and there are people in the room who are like, oh, is that not a good thing? Like, how do I didn't know, what are we talking about now? And it starts to get uncomfortable because, well, we'll save that one for another day. What we have to talk about now, we got to bring in the man who predicted the hot swap summer, Jason Calacanis. Here he is in the studio, J Cal, the one, the only, the legendary creator and host of the All In podcast and a bunch of other things. Sure. Something about an Uber investment, I believe.
I got to check the cap table. Hold on. Oh yeah, it worked out.
Elizabeth, thank you for joining the show.
I'm a big fan of the show, actually. I listen most weeks. And
wow.
I am just such a fan of independent publishing. As you know, I grew up in the 90s. And, there was a lot of gatekeepers. So I started a zine in the early 90s called Cyber Surfer. And then I started Silicon Alley Report. That's how I started my career. So when I saw what you were doing with PW, I was like, this has got great potential. It's like outsider. It's a little bit punk rock. And I've been watching it. And I'm just super impressed because I know how hard it is to make a viable media concern. And you guys are crushing it.
It's funny you say the zine thing. And thank you very much. It is like, zines are definitely, they're an influence, and like punk is an influence, and like early Vice, and like that's definitely in the DNA, I think, and the stuff that inspired me. And I'm a huge fan. And today, one of the things, I mean, we're here, obviously, we have to talk about the hot swap summer.
Sure.
And that's what we're going to get into in a second. But I think we're going to get into just All In stuff in general too, because I got a couple questions and just interesting things that have happened over this, I guess, last
3 years. 188. I think we did 186 or 187 today. So yeah, it's been
since COVID. It was, I think,
started in COVID. Yeah,
you guys started right around the same time that I started Pirate Wires.
I think so, actually, because I remember Elon retweeted something you wrote. I'm trying to remember the article, and that's how I became aware of it. And I was like,
Fifth Estate was my piece. Yeah. That was a couple years later. That was during his takeover, his hostile takeover of Twitter.
That was quite a night.
What a fun time to be writing. I loved writing about that. But listen, I want to talk about the hot swap summer.
Sure.
You honestly, like, you're a great sport on the way that people come after you online. But you sometimes don't get enough credit. And
okay. Well, thank you.
You laid down a theory on this election. You did not think, I also kind of vaguely, I was more vague, and I was like, I don't feel like Biden's going to be I still don't. Or now obviously I don't, but
doesn't make
any
sense.
I was like, it just doesn't feel real. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop or whatever, but you were more vocal about it, and explicit even, and you said, I think it's gonna be a bad debate, and it's gonna be before the convention. He's gonna be replaced. Hot swap summer. Maybe you think it's gonna be a moderate. You've talked about a little more recently about the whistleblower, but I want to back up and just say, or get your story on. I mean, why do you think people, even on your own show, Friends of the Pod, right? Like, people were resistant to the idea. What do you think was holding people back from the concept that Biden might be dropping, which seems in hindsight,
I think you have to go back 8 years, I think, to understand, and a little bit of journalism, like we're talking about here. And I've spent I started my career doing zines and being like an outsider journalist. Like I didn't go to Stanford. I went to Fordham at night. I had to in order to get published, I had to go to a photocopy store, Village Photocopy on 43rd Street in Manhattan. I still remember it when I was 23 years old, 30 years ago, printing up my magazine to get my voice out there. And I understand the journalist mindset. And what happened when Trump became president was it broke journalist brains because he wasn't supposed to win. We had just had Obama, right? And Obama felt like for liberals in New York, and I grew up in Brooklyn and lived in Manhattan, that the world had finally gotten where they wanted it. We had a black president. The world was going to get better. We were going to live in a post-race society. It felt like this coronation of Obama and getting the Bushes out and this warmongering and starting wars, all of that was kind of felt good to elites. And then Trump wins and Hillary loses because that was supposed to be the next phase of this. And it was so earth-shattering to them that somebody who's an outsider like that, who is bombastic, insult comic, all the stuff he is, and it scared them. And so then they switched from being objective journalists to advocates. And this was for me watching from the outside, I was like, wait a second. When we came up in journalism, we had fact checkers in the organization. And we would sit in meetings. And if you came with a piece, somebody would have their red pen out and say, who said this? And, although this is an anonymous source, you can't use an anonymous source. If you want to use an anonymous source in the publication, I need to talk to them on the phone and we need to get two people to back up their story. And it was taken very seriously. It was a vocation to be a journalist. That's how people looked at it. And there was a lot of respect for it. And they just gave up all their credibility by saying, you know what, we're going to get this guy out of office. We're taking this guy down. Now, Fox had decided that Rupert Murdoch was not part of journalism. He was part of entertainment. And so then they just said, you know what? Fox is winning by picking a side. We have to pick a side. And the subscription business of the New York Times exploded. Washington Post, New York Times, Guardian. I don't know if you remember this, but they were saying, in order to stop Trump, you need to subscribe to our pubs.
Yeah, I remember.
That was the marketing campaign. I mean, just think how deranged that is. They've now turned into a PAC. They're a political action committee that's, servicing stopping Trump. Now, I understand where they were coming from. That Trump was a little bit scary coming in there, and Peter Thiel got it right. Don't worry about what he's saying. Worry about the intent of his words. I'm sort of paraphrasing here. Don't take him literally. Take him
seriously, not literally.
Yeah. I mean, it was literally. Peter has his moments, and that was one of them. So, I think they've spent 8 years saying Trump is the existential risk for the world, and I get it. January 6th was dark. That was dark, and the turning over the election stuff. There's some dark stuff there that'll come out. That's already started to come out, but we just kind of lost all of that because people don't want to. It's very hard for people to be objective if you're partisan. So the left has become super partisan, right's become super partisan, and they just think Biden is the tool to beat Trump. And now they've realized he can't beat Trump, and that's why they've immediately flipped. So it just proves this theory that everybody, the media, the Democratic Party, and the celebrities, the donors class, they're all just in it to win. And Trump can't be beat by Biden. They realize it. Kamala, maybe. And now they're just wondering who's going to be the person who can beat
Did they not know that before the debate? Is what you were saying? Is there was maybe suspicion, but nobody really
They knew it was a possibility. I think there's a big cover up here. I think what's going to come out is a whistleblower will come out, and I think they're going to have known that he has dementia, Alzheimer's, cognitive decline. That neurologist who went to the White House, whatever number of times, it's either 3 or 10, and they're covering that up. I don't know if you saw that weird press conference where she's I can't tell you the name of it, even though the name's in the newspaper and on the call logs and on the visitor thing, but I can't tell you the name for privacy reasons. That was very weird. So long story short, I think they knew. And I think the reason they put the debates in June was I think they set Biden up.
Yeah.
And I think they set him up to say, if he crushes Trump, who's the easiest candidate in the world to beat, he's these are two really hated presidents, you should be able to beat him with a very moderate platform. If he doesn't beat him, then we can start this process of taking him out. And that's what you're seeing right now.
So on that, that was my rough sense of it as well. It was clearly they wanted this. Obviously now it makes sense why they pushed it forward. It's not just to kind of avoid the potential calamity of a fall debate. It's for the opportunity to replace Biden if it's really
Correct.
bad. I also saw, there was a vote change or a rule change in 2022 that would allow anyone who if he drops out after the convention, you have a series of sort of party bosses that would be able to put someone in themselves without a primary.
Yes.
And the entire thing to me feels a little bit anti-democratic, right? You've just circumvented an entire primary. So that was sort of, that was a narrative, right? So people are talking about that online, obviously. And I'm thinking like, even if you don't agree with that, it's maybe something more simple, whatever. Like clearly people are going to be talking about that and wondering about that and asking questions about that. And Paul Graham referred to this, specifically the idea that there are people who wanted this to happen on purpose as a dangerous idea. And he chastised Balaji for talking about this publicly with his big platform. He said it was really dangerous for these ideas to be getting out there.
Dangerous ideas? He evoked the dangerous ideas.
It was a dangerous idea. And this is this is a guy who
he's a bomb thrower,
who has talked about defending danger. It's like any dangerous idea other than ones I don't like are allowed to be talked about.
It's actually the central premise and a brilliant one of his investment thesis is to hire people who are rule breakers and who are hard to get along with. This is a fundamental tenet of venture capital, is that the people who you make the most money with are the people who are willing to reinterpret the rules, bend them, sometimes break them, which happens when you bend things sometimes. And he would ask people like, hey, what have you done that, not that's illegal, but what have you hacked? What have you got in trouble for? He's looking for troublemakers. And so, if you did an illegal business in your childhood, that's like Y Combinator big +1 for getting in. It
was disappointing to me to see that. But it was also a pattern, not of his, but it reminded me of something that happened to you guys on the All In Pod. So you had Vinod Khosla come after you. The reference to you guys, there were two sort of things. One was the
I heard your episode on it. I think you had very good clarity on it. I think he said he kind of was a word salad of like, they're MAGA and they're not in Silicon Valley, and we were all
extremist.
So
extremist is the word that I keyed it on. And here's the reason. So in both of these cases, you have two very prominent high status individuals in the tech industry going after other high status individuals in tech with bad ideas, not challenging the ideas, but challenging their ability to share those ideas.
Yeah.
And it feels really reminiscent of what was happening throughout the early 2020s or late 2010s, and then 2020, 2021, where we were trying to sort of like quarantine ideas off. And it feels like almost like a frightened reaction from these people. Like we can't, culture maybe in tech is changing or something, and they're trying to sort of shut down that change rather than engage in any sort of way. I mean, do you kind of agree with this roughly, or how do you feel about it?
A person who would see how in 2016, if you said you supported Trump, you would have people quit in your company, you would lose venture capital investment, and people might protest your product. And then
I worked for Peter Thiel. I was there when it happened in 2016. Yeah. We were the only ones. It was crazy.
Yeah. And so then you fast forward and it's 2024 and Sachs hosts a fundraiser, and kind of, if you want credibility in tech, it's to be, so punk rock that you're willing to say, Trump's not the perfect package, but it's better than somebody who is suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia or cognitive decline, right? I mean, the Weekend at Bernie's thing is like kind of a cruel analogy, but it's kind of accurate. They're trying to cover something up with somebody who's not able to do the job. And that's why when a meme, especially a dank one, sticks, my theory is it's because it's accurate. It's kind of like the relationship of humor, right? It's like when something kind of hits home, we can laugh about it and process it. So, yeah, I mean, the thoughtful thing, I think, would be to say, well, what is it about Trump's platform in this election? Forget about what happened in the past. I've kind of like put that into one box, Trump 1.0, and now I'm like sort of studying Trump 2.0. And when I look at Trump 2.0, he's acting more presidential, less insult comic humor, less name calling. And he's like, this abortion thing, like, and stacking the court. Yeah, people don't like that. So yeah, screw the evangelical votes that got me in the first time. They're not going to help me this time. Who's going to help me this time? Moderates. And women. They're going to decide the election according to most of the pollsters. So yeah, you know what I'll say? Hey, listen, I gave it to the states. That's a better legal, framework. So if that's the better legal framework, let them decide. And look, they're making the right decision. And by the way, I'm totally for, rape, incest, all these exceptions. And yeah, maybe you all think it's 12 weeks. Some other state thinks it's 24, and that's fine. But the only thing I'm against is killing babies when they come out of the womb. It's like, oh, really? What a brave stance. You don't believe in killing babies when they're born. Like.
Yeah, he's super moderated. And or is your assumption that like it's the fact that he's not as radical seeming as that is maybe just these people are more frightened or something?
He plays people.
Well, what do you guys make of? I want to talk about
evangelicals, and then he's now playing the moderates, right? He's brilliant in that way. He knows how to, get their votes, basically, like a great politician.
But what do you make of the way that you guys specifically have been targeted for talking about this stuff? I mean, it's
anytime you get an audience, because this is like the third time I've been micro famous in my career. Like in the 90s, I was super famous in New York with Silicon Alley Reporter. I had like why you and I were on that weird signal group that Eric set up, I think. And, like I had a New Yorker profile written about me. It's kind of like that was the height in the 90s of being important. I was on Charlie Rose, the other height of being important. Like I've been famous 3 times and not famous, most of the other times. And so every time that happens, people come after you. It's like, and the same media that props you up then also comes for the takedown. So for me, it's like, who cares? I'm already financially independent. I've got a great family. I've got a great life. I've got great friends. Like there's nothing anybody can do to me. Like, I mean, if I got canceled, I joke with my daughter. It's like, oh God, please let this be the year I get canceled and I can't work. Because then I could ski 50 days instead of 36 or 40. I could go to Japan twice a year instead of once. Please let me get fired. Please
I've had the fantasy of having everything taken away from me before as well.
So
and just taking a break, like just like a few weeks off you.
Please cancel me. Like, yeah, I'd love it. It'd be so fantastic.
But what about like, so within tech specifically, so I'd heard that there were people who were threatened for going to the fundraiser, and not by journal. Obviously, everyone. I think journalists.
No, people said Ron Conway called people and maybe Reid Hoffman to kind of. I don't know if they threatened them. I think it's more like, is this something you really want to do? Did you think this through? What about your kids? What about the women in your life? Like that's how the pressure comes down. That's the pressure that comes to me for being friends with Sax. Sax and I are best friends. Like we've been friends for over 20 years. Like we like to hang out and watch movies together. We like to hang out and play cards together. And people are now like, hey, you guys are both getting too famous and you're friends and you disagree. So therefore you can't be friends anymore. I'm like, to quote my friend Elon, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
I'll pick my friends and you can
Well, that was my next thing though. You are the moderate on the show. Friedberg as well, but like I feel like you've made more of a you've made more noise about your personal views publicly, and so I think it's like it seems more shocking to have you being on a podcast with Trump all of a sudden interviewing, even though you're sort of against or whatever.
I mean, once in a lifetime opportunity to interview a president.
I mean,
how do you not take it?
Who would you? I would not say no to Ocasio, and I can't stand her. I would be like, yes, please.
Oh my God, please.
I have
AOC.
a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But you're the one. Not David spent his whole life with his views.
Partisan.
He wrote the diversity myth. Like this is a person who is at this point, or co-wrote it with Peter. Like at this point, he's surrounded himself with people who are fine with who he is. But like, I imagine you're getting a lot of heat as you become more popular and as the show really plays a huge role in altering. I would say, I don't think it's the one thing that's altering culture, but it's one of the major catalysts in the sort of broadening of the Overton window within tech and the sort of slow cultural change in tech. I imagine that you're getting a lot of heat, like, privately from other tech people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'd say it's plus and minus. I get long emails from the woke side, and I've probably lost some acquaintances over it, but not friends. So, I'm 53. I'm an old man now, but like, I'm sure if I was, in my 20s or 30s, this would be having an effect on me. But again, as I said earlier, like my life is absolutely fantastic. Like I have everything I could ever want. I have friends. I have experiences. Like somebody writing me a long email with their like Trump derangement syndrome outlined bullet by bullet, or some MAGA person telling me like there's some grand conspiracy and like January 6th was manufactured by like the FBI or the Democrats. And I'm like, really? I mean, did you look at any of the transcripts of like the Oath Keepers? Like these guys are lunatics. Like, can you not hold these two things in your head? So I actually just ignore it. I mean, who cares? Like, this is not the point of my life. And I will say, for every one of those I get hundreds of people just saying, I love the show. Can I take a selfie? And it's my friends and I listen to it, and it creates more conversation. So for me, in the third act of my career, I'm just kind of like, it's kind of neat that people are thinking and having hard conversations with their friends. And I kind of like the Overton window being wide open, because I'm a Gen Xer, right? I'm a free range kid. Like, we like, full contact debates. We liked going to Thanksgiving and having like our racist uncle and our liberal hippie other uncle fight. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating to watch. I prefer that world.
I grew up listening to talk radio with my dad in the car in Jersey. It was New Jersey 101.5. And they'd have, 3 segments an hour with the hosts, and people would call in and they would be like brutally fighting back and forth because the callers would be like hostile, right?
Yeah.
I remember I called in age 10. I called in.
I can see that. That's on brand.
It would be late at night and I would try and get on, and they would let me on sometimes, and I would try and share my opinion. And that's the stuff that I think I carry with me to today, honestly. It's like hugely formative. I saw, first of all, I have a couple questions about the whistleblower and the hot swap, but I want to get...
The hot swap there is pretty simple. They are going to put somebody in there, and the next thing I coined was the speed run primary. I don't think most people in pop culture know what a speed run is, apparently. So a bunch of Democrats in Semaphore and Professor Coltakes, I think, both cribbed my concept a week or two later and put in it like that they want to do a Democratic... I don't know what they called it, like a fast Democratic primary. That's what's going to happen next, I predict. They're going to just say I think Biden might actually resign and let Kamala be the first president of the United States. That would be like a gift to her and really boost her in her profile. And then they say, everybody throw your hat in the ring. We're going to have 5 debates and we're going to take over the media for the summer, because the summer's slow anyway for media. Like, journalists are all on vacation. Their sources are all on vacation in Europe, whatever. So now you get 5 weeks of primary. You start with 10 people or 8 people at the first debate. Anybody can come. You got Dean Phillips coming back, the crazy crystal lady, anybody in between.
Marianne, let's go.
I love her. Get her in there. I'm going to defeat Trump with love. He's my favorite character.
My work?
Sure, why not? Cast a spell. But then, you go from, you have Gavin up there and whoever else, Whitmer. Then you go from 8 to 6 to 4 to 2. And then whoever gets there, they pick number 2 as their vice president or whatever, so something in that range. Think about that, what that would do in terms of excitement versus the incredibly unpopular Biden and the incredibly unpopular Trump. People want a moderate, and I think a moderate would emerge. It would totally break the corrupt, woke lunacy of the left. Now, I don't know if they are going to, how hard they'll fight it. They're going to obviously fight it, Brandon, but I do think it could be like this incredible crash and burn for the Democratic Party and rebirth, right? Like a phoenix, they would rise as moderates. That's my kind of dream scenario.
And what are the mechanics of the speedrun primary? Are the voters, the Democratic voters, voting again, or is this sort of just like a consensus, popularity contest type thing?
Yeah, I think it'd be a consensus kind of thing with the delegates. Yeah. I mean, everybody's like, it's not possible. The people who say it's not possible are partisans who are terrified at the prospect that you could hot swap. Because think about what an advantage it is to hot swap.
Oh, it's huge. I keep saying that as well. Why wouldn't you want to take this against Trump?
It's a free option. It's literally like, I dealt you 2 cards. One of them's a deuce and one of them's a king. Would you like a new card? You could throw the deuce back in the deck and we'll give you a new card. It's like, it can only get better.
Yes.
Sure. Give me a better card.
I saw people early on sort of complaining about this as, or complaining about the concept of moving out Biden because it would be this huge disadvantage. It's like, it's obviously an advantage if you know who you're fighting to then select top down someone tailor-made to go after that person. All of the weaknesses that he possibly has or whatever would be a huge, huge, huge disadvantage.
You could tailor the person, exactly. You could tailor the person to Trump's weaknesses. So what are Trump's strengths / weaknesses? 80% of people agree with him about the border. Okay, so you find somebody who agrees about the border. RFK agrees about the border. Dean Phillips agrees about the border. They visited the border. Great. You take that off the table, right? And you just slowly take each issue off the table with that Manchurian candidate. I'm sorry, hot swapped candidate.
So my concern there is don't you think the Democratic constituency is going to be massively betrayed by the fact that their chosen candidate is just being replaced, number one, and number two, a person of color is being sidestepped because she should have the nomination, right? Like these are two, in my opinion, really big lines that you're crossing. And if I'm a Dem strategist, I'm like, look, let's just take the L here. Let's have Biden step down. Kamala takes over. We do the right thing according to our voters. Trump wins, and we set ourselves up for like a massive midterm in 2026.
Yeah, no. I'll tell you why you're wrong. So I think you have two of the right issues that they have to overcome, which the DEI candidate, like, oh my God, a woman of color, how could you ever do that to her and replace her with a white male or whoever? So that's valid. I think the way they handle it is super easy. None of us knew that Joe's cognitive decline was happening, and he made a choice for himself and his family, and we're just responding to that reality. It's an unfortunate reality that happens to all of us, Brandon. Sadly, we will all, if we live long enough, have to deal with these incredibly challenging issues. And then when it comes to the DEI issue or like replacing a woman, it's very simple. We are the Democratic Party. We care about democracy. Therefore, we're going to let the democratic process run out with this speed run primary. We're going to do a primary, and we're going to let the best woman or man or anything in between, they, them, it, whoever.
Everyone's allowed to compete.
Everybody is allowed to compete. And that's what, and we wish we weren't in this situation, and we wish Joe the best, and we're celebrating Joe. And this Democratic primary is a tribute to his 50 years in politics. Brandon, it's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I'm running for press secretary, by the way.
You really want to be press secretary?
I do things for the lulz. And the reason I put the suit on today was because we just taped All In before this, and I wanted to troll Sachs because I started doing Fox News.
That's my next.
So I started doing Fox News strictly to troll Sachs. And the guy, Jesse Waters, I guess, who is the new Tucker, he loves me. So they want me to be like a correspondent kind of thing.
Your Chiron said Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur.
Love it. Great. Good for deal flow. So they, I think press secretary would be hilarious. And can you imagine just going out and talking to the press every day?
I think you would love it. I think you would love it.
Or whoever. I would have
a lot to write about and talk about. I endorse it.
Great.
But on your Jesse Waters appearance, which I caught, I think was it last night or the night before?
I did it 2 nights ago, and then I did it 2 weeks ago. So now this Calacanis thing with my predictions coming true has kind of got a little bit of steam.
Yeah.
And
he brought you on and he asked you specifically about your whistleblower, and you talked about it. You talked about it as if you were delivering the news. You were like,
yes.
So now the X, Y, and Z happened, and the next thing that's happening is you're going to have a whistleblower.
Yeah. So this is the way you can own.
On Fox News, I heard Jesse talking about the whistleblower. He's like, the whistleblower is coming next. Here comes the whistleblower. But you weren't even on TV. He's like carried it on. You've moved into his mind.
If you want to incept
memes.
So I kind of grew up in the 90s. Marshall McLuhan. My friend Doug Rushkoff wrote a lot of books about this. And Doug's one of my best friends. We used to go to the Knicks games every week. And we would talk about media theory. And he kind of educated me, this, like unsophisticated kid in Brooklyn, about how memes form, or what's a meme? It's an idea that kind of spreads. This is before memes as they exist today. This was like culture of memes. And we kind of had a concept of hacking media. And you had to hack, traditional media, because that was the only media that existed. So and it was called guerrilla marketing or hacking media. And so when you want to incept an idea, you have to think about the person receiving the idea. And have they, how open are they, in terms of influence? Now, whistleblowers, that's something that Fox loves. I mean, that's conspiracy theory central. They're like just next to Alex Jones. So you bring up a whistleblower, they love that. And so I was like, I'm going to incept the whistleblower. And the way to incept the whistleblower is to say, this is what's going to happen. And it's clearly a prediction, but they've taken it and run with it, because I packaged it properly, right? And this is how you hack media. It's the packaging. It's the title. It's the keyword you use. Hot Swap Summer, Hot Girl Summer, Megan Thee Stallion. You're kind of hijacking that a little bit. So you have to hijack something and then add to it, right? Speed run, that exists. People love doing a speed run in video games. And then you put primary at the end, right? And then people remember it because it evokes in them something they understand. It unlocks dopamine in their brains. And so the whistleblower, there's obviously 50 people who know the state of Joe's cognitive decline. There's at least 50. And so what I said on All In today was, not only do I think there's going to be a whistleblower, I encourage anybody who has this information to do the patriotic thing and to step forward, whether you're the doctor, the nurse, the secretary, the EA, the person who overheard something in the Oval Office, or somebody's sibling. It is your moral, civic, ethical, patriotic duty to tell the truth here to the American people. And you should do it. And, the podcast is pretty popular. Like top 10 podcasts in the world every week. That's going to get emailed. That clip will now get emailed to those people. And one of those people will be sitting there at night and they're going to have a crisis because they're going to say, you know what? Jake Hal's right. This is wrong. Lying to the American people is wrong.
Last question for you. And thank you for your time. I know you guys were recording today yourself. Jay Stradamus, is that what they say?
Nostradamus, I think.
Nostradamus?
I got the domain name for the lulls. Nostradamus.
I was going to ask you about, your predictions for the Democratic Party, but you already gave it to us. I want to know more about, we did some reporting on the sort of Trump VC vibe shift. And it turns out like funding hasn't really changed at all. In fact, a little bit more on the Democrat side. So it seems like culture is changing. It is not yet necessarily mapping to the best of my knowledge. It doesn't seem to be entirely mapping to like real sort of monetary change. And now I'm wondering just about the shape of, specifically in tech, the media and the culture. What do you see 5 years from now, even just let's say 3 years from now? Where is tech culture? Politically, culturally, how different is it from today and then from 2020? Like what does it look like?
It's a great question. Tech has always been very libertarian and liberal. And those are slightly different things, obviously. Socially liberal and then maybe less government, which would describe the Conservative Party previously before they got involved in abortion and all this stuff. And it's super interesting because I do think if you think about that libertarian bias of like less government, your instincts are correct. You should follow the money. Lena Khan was hired at a very young age for writing a bunch of reports or papers, essays, whatever, when she was in college, graduate school, about stopping, preserving future competition. That the way we should do antitrust in this country was to stop future competition, as if she could look in a crystal ball and know, hey, Google buying YouTube or Facebook buying Instagram will reduce competition in social later on, et cetera. Okay, that's an interesting theory. Great. A graduate school theory, perfectly fine. Biden put her in charge of the FTC.
It's a break from the consumer harm stuff. It's a different way of looking.
Usually it's supposed to be, is the consumer been harmed? And there are tactical things that, like price fixing. We all of us run some, burger joints. We go and we play golf and we're like, what are you charging for a Happy Meal? Oh, $5.99? Okay, yeah. What are you charging for a Happy Meal? Oh, $3.99? It's pretty far from $5.99, don't you think? And it's like, yeah, I'll charge $5.25. And we all decide we're going to keep that in a certain thing. Or there's dumping products onto the market. Okay, I'm going to make my Uber rides, I'm going to lose 50 cents on every dollar for Uber rides, and then I'm going to triple the prices and I'm going to price gouge, right? So there are tactical things like that the government should look at, I think. Lena Khan has cost people a lot of money. The Biden administration has cost people a lot of money. Most startups don't IPO. In fact, I've only had maybe 3 or 4 in my first 200 or 300 investments IPO: Uber, Robinhood, Desktop Metal, Root AI, 4. Most of them get bought or shut down. Most shut down, and then a bunch get bought. This is fucking with people's paper. And if you fuck with people's paper, they're gonna take it only so long. And then you look at taxes, and you look at the wealth tax. You look at the grumblings about a wealth tax. You look at the transfer tax, like when the Slack founder, Stuart Butterfield, left San Francisco and he sold his, $12 million house, which seems like a crazy thing. It's probably like a 4,000 square foot house. It's like the average house in Texas. They were making a big deal in San Francisco that they got him for 2% for selling this, over $10 million house. And whatever, they're going to give it to the homeless industrial complex. Like, people pay attention to that stuff. And then people move their headquarters to a lower tax state. Maybe people set up a stock market in Texas. I don't know if you watch that. Stock market being set up in Texas. So, and then people might reincorporate their companies out of Delaware and other places like Nevada.
But it sounds like you're implying a more rightward swing, a continuing rightward swing.
A more libertarian, I would say. Yeah. Which, it used to be hard to put people on a spectrum, because when you said Republican, they used to be for less government involvement in your life and less spending and more fiscal responsibility. And then Trump spent, $8 trillion, put us $8 trillion more in debt. And so they're big spending too. They want to get involved in people's lives, like reproductive issues. So it's hard to pick a party now. Like I am certainly somebody as a moderate who doesn't have a home anymore. I have no home. Like, I'm socially liberal. I think people should be able to do whatever they want. And I think it would be great if we paid less taxes and you had less regulations. Where does that put me? Which party am I part of? I don't know. So I think it's a libertarian thing that's kind of happening. And it's like this guy Millet. The reason he's resonating with people so much is we realize the administrative state and these employees, there's too many of them. And we want less government, less regulation. So I think that's where we wind up in 3, 4, 5 years, is people saying, do we need the Department of Education? Vivek is kind of, he's annoying. He's abrasive. He's a know-it-all. If you went to school with him, you probably hated him because he's like that guy who's super annoying and talks over everybody. But he's right. Like, you should just literally go into government and be like, anybody who was born on an odd number day and an odd number year, you don't have a job. And if you're born on an even number year, you have a job.
I like the idea of just getting rid of Trump.
Just get rid of half. Get rid of 20% day one. Fuck it. We're so in debt and our interest payments are so high. Like, just get rid of 20% of people everywhere. Everybody share the pain, just like a corporation.
Well, listen, I am excited to see what happens. I am looking forward to the whistleblower. I'm looking forward to the rest of the hot swap summer.
It's going to be a great hot swap summer.
I will be listening to the All In, as I love to do. It's a great show. Obviously, everybody here, I'm sure, is listening to it already. But thank you for joining. It's been real.
And
until next time. And I'll see you on Fox as well.
Well, and I love PW. So keep it up.
Thank you, sir.
You guys are super punk rock, and I listen every week. So great job.
We were kind of talking about Democrats and sort of the party in disarray and Project 2025. Amidst this chaos, all of it's a lot of it's politically motivated too, right? Like the Project 2025 thing is clearly a political attempt to distract voters from the chaos of the Democratic Party, and the Republicans attempting to pass the SAVE Act also feels politically motivated to me. It seems like a great opportunity to score some points with voters rather than an earnest attempt at policy. But I'm going to allow Sanjana to break that one down for us before we start talking about it.
The SAVE Act. Yeah,
Yes.
So basically this is sort of, there's been a perennial battle among Democrats and Republicans over voter ID law, but basically yesterday, House Republicans and a couple of Democrats passed the SAVE Act, which would essentially require that you show proof of citizenship in order to vote. And so currently, voter ID laws vary extremely widely by state. You have states in which you're required to present, usually sort of more conservative states, you're required to present proof of photo ID when you vote. And then you have, the sort of majority of states where, you might have to sign some statement under perjury when you're registering to vote that says I am a U.S. citizen, because it is already illegal to vote as a non-citizen. And there's actually very strict penalties if you end up getting caught. But usually you just sign a sort of statement and then you can, show up to vote and may or may not have to show a form of ID. And so after this passed in the House, the White House released a statement and basically said that Biden would veto it. They said, there's no evidence that non-citizens routinely vote in U.S. elections. The sort of typical Democratic Party line is that this is a racist policy because, some people might not have access to the means to verify their citizenship. Maybe they lost
Some
their
people.
birth. Yeah, they always sort of bring up, black and brown people who...
Black people don't know how to get driver's licenses. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, well, I guess it wouldn't be... I mean, it would be more than a driver's license, right? It would be a sort of birth certificate or a passport or something that shows that you're a U.S. citizen. But still, I mean, it is presumably not super hard to verify your citizenship, or it shouldn't be. But yeah, the White House is going to veto this if it passes the Senate, which seems like it's unlikely. But this has sort of catalyzed debate over voter ID laws once again. So
I mean, it's clearly, I think the Republicans obviously just want to be able to say the Democrats opposed this bill. And I mean, it just doesn't sit right with me, the idea of opposing the bill. It's sort of like you were saying, well, it's obvious, it's already a crime. It's like, well, breaking into cars in San Francisco is also a crime. But if you told me that there was a bill on the table to, I don't know, stop it, I would be super down on account of it still happens. I don't know, Riley, what do you make of this one?
Yeah, it's just smart politicking by Republicans to get Democrats on a vote of, yes, I don't care about whether or not illegal immigrants vote in the election, which is essentially sort of what it's saying. And it's, for everything that they say about, oh, we got to save our democracy. Democracy's on the ballot. To get them on the record where that's just kind of not the case right before the election is just really smart. And it's like sort of unexpected for the party that thought Mitt Romney was relatable and needed to sort of rally the troops to convince themselves that banning IVF was a bad idea. It's just sort of smart politicking and a little bit unexpected, but yeah.
Shout out Mitt Romney.
Yeah, Mitt Romney frazzled me. I was like, whoa, disrupted.
It also feels like it sort of opens the door for like a lot of people to sort of question again. Like if Biden were to win this time around, I think you're going to have a lot of people who sort of question like who was voting in the election this time around. And I think that's sort of a dangerous prospect for democracy. So
I saw some Democrats talking about this today, actually, something similar. They were saying that's the reason we have to get rid of Biden is because nobody has faith in him as a leader right now. And so for him to win feels sort of inconceivable, and it will fuel the next president will, or he as the next president would never be seen as legitimate. It would be seen as like a deep, which I mean, feels correct. But then I don't know, like I wouldn't vote for someone with dementia, but I've seen people say that they would. And I guess if you believe that Trump is Hitler, like if you really believe that he was Hitler, wouldn't you vote for a vegetable over Hitler? I would. I would definitely vote for a person with dementia over literally Hitler.
Considering Biden's health for the past 3.5 years, the country hasn't fallen apart. We've actually successfully proven that we don't need a president. So at least for me, that bar would be low to vote for a vegetable. It's kind of sad. Shouldn't be that way, but I'm just being honest here.
No, but that is also because it is like, if we don't, Sanjana, you were asking earlier, like, what are we actually voting? Are we accepting that we're not voting for a person, but whatever is around the person? Yeah. I think people have implicitly accepted that at this point, that it's like, oh, well, there's a whole team of people, and I don't really need to know who they are to know that they're like probably on my side, which that I don't even know what to make of. I really don't know what to make of that.
I've seen that said explicitly by some Biden supporters who were basically like, you get the apparatus of aides and the policymakers and, you just need, like, Biden is basically just a figurehead. And so that's why they say they're going to vote for him no matter what, which is really interesting if you compare that to like how strong and idiosyncratic Trump's personality is. Like Trump is kind of the antithesis in some ways of like the president as administrative state, in that he's just like so unpredictable. So it is a kind of interesting dichotomy that you have, I guess, presuming Biden stays on the ballot, that you will have.
There is a poetry to it, to be running I don't want to say a megalomaniac, but like the cult of personality type figure, the classic strong man against nothing, which implies, what you said, sort of you didn't say deep state, but I'm thinking deep state, but the administrative state around him, super interesting, and also a super interesting read on, we keep going back to the democracy thing. This is a trial, it's democracy's on the line or whatever. But concurrently, you have the Democrats flirting with no primary. So the Democrats sort of circumventing the Democratic process, possibly, as we were talking about earlier with Jason. And you now have AOC calling for the impeachment of several Supreme Court justices. It is feeling not so democratic on that side. Who has been following the impeachment thing?
So AOC on Wednesday, it says yesterday right now, introduced 2 articles of impeachment against Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. And just like the details of this are, the Alito articles are hilarious. I think we covered this in a podcast a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago. The story of like Alito's wife hanging an upside down flag in their front yard during January 6th. And the internet like had this huge debate about what the upside down flag means. If you look at the American flag code, which there is one, I didn't know that. An upside down flag means that the country is like in a state of distress and like you're worried or whatever. Like that's a signal. Anyways, this like caused some like unemployed millennial neighbors or whatever to like chimp out on Alito and his wife. And there's this whole beef. You can look it up. Matt, you can pull it up. Maybe the New York Times article. I think there is one. Anyways, so Alito's articles of impeachment accused him of, because he allowed that flag to fly in his front yard during January 6th, that he improperly did not recuse himself from Supreme Court cases related to January 6th. So that's like the meat of the Alito accusation. It seems very, very thin to me. The Thomas accusation doesn't seem as thin, but seems potentially as a stretch. I don't know. I'm not a legal scholar. He seems to have actually not sort of declared that he's gotten lots and lots of gifts from this guy called Harlan Crow, who is on the board of the American Enterprise Institute. And the articles of impeachment accuse Thomas of regularly taking up positions that the American Enterprise Institute has sort of proffered. And so thus they say there's like there's a conflict of interest going on here, and Thomas should be impeached. So that's kind of those are the sort of general facts about it. She's going to introduce it to Congress. This has happened one time in the past. Supreme Court justice was impeached by Congress in 1804. He was acquitted by the Senate, and they've tried it 15 times otherwise, and neither house, both houses acquitted the person getting impeached both times.
Well, it's a huge kind of scary thing. The court stuff is really dangerous, I think, the way they're attacking the court, because if you shake the faith in that institution, I don't know how do you come back from that, really? If the whole country just fundamentally loses faith in the court, then there's not a solution. There's not like we're going to let you vote for them or something. That becomes way more hostile and way less objective. The whole thing is, even if there's no such thing maybe as objectivity, I think we actually, in this case, sort of need it. We need the illusion of this. We need Democrats and Republicans sort of roughly aligned on what the purpose of the court is and what they're supposed to be doing. And this thing just, I think it drives like a wooden stake right through the heart of what we need out of the court. It just makes it way more political. You're going to see renewed calls from the left to pack the court, which in my mind effectively dissolves it. Once you pack the court and they're all left wingers, it's like, okay, well, you've seized the court, you've dissolved the old thing, you've created a new thing. That's kind of a legal coup. And no one will ever take this seriously again, because the only way to fix it is to do a top-down gesture from, like, it'll be, the executive doing the same thing. From whatever party he comes from or she comes from, people are going to say, oh, well, the court's biased and things like this. And I don't know, man. AOC.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the Dems get away with saying that Trump is a threat to democracy. This seems like a threat to democracy to me. And just combine it with the timeline of Warren continually trying to introduced she's calling it the Judiciary Act of, now it's 2023. She's introduced this thing twice, and it adds 4 justices to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean,
this has only been done. The last time they added Supreme Court
Lincoln?
Justices, it was around the Civil War.
Or Grant. It was either Lincoln or Grant. I think it was Grant who did it.
Yeah. So the first time they did it, they added, it was just to accommodate the number of circuits. Like the country was like still growing, right? So they were like, we need more Supreme Court justices. It was expanded to 9 justices after that, 10 during the Civil War. I don't know really why, but then they moved it back down to 9. This is in 1863 or so. And so it's been like 180 years that we've had 9. And all of a sudden, for whatever reason, we need 4 more.
Well, the problem is we all know what the reason is. It's like they want to control the court. So Democrats control most founts of power in the country, unofficial and official. And this is the real juicy one, because historically they've used it to pass law. I mean, that's what Roe v. Wade was. You've used the court to effectively pass law without ever having to cast a vote, because you know that you never could have passed a vote like that. When was Roe? Was it 60 something or 70 something?
73, I think.
So you couldn't do it now. You couldn't pass that law now. You certainly couldn't pass it then. You couldn't pass something as expansive as Roe. And that was, how the left was using the court, and now they can't, and they're really mad, and they want to take it over. They also want to jail the opposition candidate, and they want to not have votes at all to elect their candidate for president, which is just not super democratic, but here we are.
I would just say, by the way, they have plenty of opportunities to codify the principles of Roe into law, and they never fucking did.
Well, they did, like I was saying before, they did with gay marriage and with...
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tired partisan politics, right? It's all great when it works your way with Roe v. Wade or gay marriage, or when you can yas Queen Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But as soon as it goes against your way, it's like, okay, now we have to pack the court. It's like, okay, like that's not how this works. Like,
yeah, with Roe specifically, it's just like you couldn't pass it because there aren't enough Democrats who agree with you. It's super, super, super contentious, and it cuts in different ways. Like, this is one that's really weird. There are plenty of Democrats who are against who are against abortion generally. I don't know what they would say about Roe, but it's a complicated issue, and yeah, that's that on the other deranged AOC news of the day. I do want to kind of end with brief infrastructure chat, which I think is pretty interesting. While we were all watching the mayor of New York City sort of get hyped up and excited over the new trash can that he released, there was like viral memes of his trash can. He was really, really proud of it. This story from 2 years ago, I believe it was in Gothamist, went viral again about the what was it, $2 million or $4 million that went to McKinsey to study the problem of the trash can or whatever. Very, very stupid. And sort of just once again beats the drum of we have no state capacity. We are not capable of building things anymore. I mean, this is like the nation that once built the Hoover Dam, and now we're celebrating a trash can. It's really bad. And I think we do have to come back and revisit that sometimes and just remember how incapable we are at this point in time. But then this other story it didn't go viral, but it got some attention online. I saw it because I'm into trains and into infrastructure. It was in New York Mag, and it's about Amtrak. So Amtrak has been sort of melting down all summer, and New York Mag sort of went in there and broke down the history of the service and kind of tried to understand what was going on. What I learned and didn't really know much about was Amtrak was originally the Pennsylvania Railroad, and that was made sort of grossly unprofitable for a series of government gestures like 100 years ago. Ultimately was nationalized by the state, and from the 1970s on, this once private road has been run by the government. And from that point on, literally back in 1972, I think, or 73, when it was taken over by the government, everybody knew the whole thing had to be replaced. This was already a 50-year-old service. It was corroded to the point where they were in danger of losing service. So beyond the world of expansion, we have to replace this thing. And what followed has just been decades and decades of grift and waste, actual fraud in many cases. The most recent one happened under Obama. There was like a close to $500 million package that was given to Amtrak to start replacing this stuff. Almost all of it was lost, but really stolen, and nothing was improved. And so here we are. Basically, I think the interesting thing to me about this was just the concept of, I guess on some level I knew this, but to see it written down, like this is 100 years old. We are riding on something that we have not built, like we have not replaced, we have not refurbished. It is 100 years old. Our grandparents and great grandparents, in some cases, are the people who built this, and we inherited it. Not even from them. Like it's been generations that we've not been doing stuff. And that's a really kind of, I think that's the high level. We always touch at different pieces of what's going on in the country. And, we want to get to this really interesting progressive world of the future where everything's better and abundant. And we've got like cool, rocket trains across the country that look like something out of The Great Gatsby. And I can have a martini in the Rockies or something as I soar through the mountains. We can't even get commuter rail from New York to Boston that's consistent and on time because we're not able to build anything. And this is it. It's like this stuff is taken over by the state. It ends up in the hands of people who don't care about it and are not they're not incentivized for things to work. They are just incentivized to take as much shit as they can from the public, and everything kind of crumbles. And then if you try and subvert that system, if you try and change that system, if you try and top down clean up that system, you're accused not of trying to like fix the trains, but of hating trains, and hating poor people or hating whatever else. And this is why I think the sort of anti-civil service thing really speaks to me the most, because I look at the Amtrak stuff and I think like there need to be a lot more people in jail. You should not be able to just lose $500 million of public money. I don't know. Sanj, what do you make of this story? I know that you follow this stuff.
I mean, it's especially depressing when you consider the fact that Northeast corridor is like arguably the most well-connected region in the country, right? I mean, this is like the pinnacle of American public transportation is Bosniewash, and it is just completely decayed. And I don't know, it's depressing too, because it's like, it feels kind of hopeless when you think about how many people have really like an economic incentive to do nothing. I mean, the perennial example is like California's high-speed rail, which we've talked about a lot, and just, it's just a money pit. Like nothing's ever going to get done. No one even thinks it's going to get built, I think, at this point. Like it's just, every few years they'll sort of like hand wave over a few more $100 million, and nothing happens. And I don't know. I don't want to become cynical because I'd like to think that we could still, build things. It can happen in other countries. I mean, I was just in France last week, and like, in the south of France, which is not a very well-funded part of the country, and they're doing like, massive refurbishments on the trains. Did witness some theft on the train, but like it was running very well and on time. And, it's like, it does feel like there is this kind of, weird, just intractable rot at the heart of our government. And I don't know. I don't know what save, and I know we talked about this last week a little bit, but like what save some kind of, really crazy political revolution would get us out of this. I don't know.
Like a new project, perhaps? Maybe a 2020
maybe one next year. Yeah.
People usually forget that a lot of the New York's infrastructure was built by private companies. So the Pennsylvania Railroad Company built the original Penn Station. They used to have to take ferries from Jersey City and go into the city. So like, we'll just build our own train station. So if you look at the immaculate original Penn Station, they built that. The subway was private companies. So if you go on the east and west side, you notice they're like kind of different sized cars because they're different companies. They're private companies that eventually became the MTA, which is now more government rot. So like, I always keep saying for like a city like New York, I go like, I wish there was like a boring company here who would just like, look, we're going to build the whole new tunnels because it costs $1 billion just to build a mile of track in New York City. We can't do that. We can't even build to the Upper East Side right now into East Harlem.
They say you can't. And then I think like, when you give me a price like, okay, $1 billion for a mile of new subway, that's crazy. But also, we just had $1 trillion infrastructure plan. And where the fuck did that money go? Like
$100 billion from New York City.
It's not like they're not spending billions of dollars. Like it's unlimited money on some level, but it's not put into this. I think the real problem is that you have two parties in America, one of whom believes ostensibly in using the government to do things, and the other, which rejects that, the Republicans reject that conceptually. So you don't, in Europe, you have multiple parties who all believe in like the concept of public transportation and public education and things. And so it's not just one that's demanding stuff and one that's like, no more spending. I think if you had both of the parties sort of on board conceptually with the transit, they'd be holding each other accountable maybe, but I don't even know. I really don't know. I think it's like you need some kind of Robert Moses to come in here with entrenched crazy amounts of political power that you just an ability to sort of navigate a system to make things happen, I think. Cost of labor is really expensive. Like a lot of that comes down to, I was looking at the, the 2nd Avenue subway line backstory. That is straight up fraud. There's just people being paid who are not working. I think the mob's involved, though I gotta maybe be quiet about that because I'm not trying to die. I think that's also, I got people DMing me over the trash can stuff. They were like, the reason this is actually happening is because Adams is fighting back against the mob. And I don't know anything about that. Again, like, do not Tony Soprano me. And in fact, I'm not even totally, like, if the mob kept the crime down, I would not go on. Like, I'm not coming after you guys. Please do not kill me. But I would like the trains to run on time. Riley, what do you think about the trains?
Yeah, it's a clear example of like bureaucracy just not functioning well. And so that's why it's so peculiar when they push back at the notion of dismantling the bureaucracy. It's like we have visual evidence of it not functioning well. So why is it such a big deal that we would want to dismantle it? It makes no sense to me.
It is. We are having a conversation just about bureaucracy, and no one really wants to be clear about that for some reason. I think the Republicans, because it's not a sexy thing to be like, I hate bureaucracy. And the Democrats, because maybe they don't want to admit that that Trump's over the target. It's that phrase of like, that's why they're really freaking out. It's the bureaucracy stuff. Like, that's really the one thing that I am certain who knows what he's going to do in office, but from his rhetoric, the through line is like, get rid of those people. And I don't know. If that happened in every corner of the country, I would not hate it. Eric, thoughts? Because you guys, you got Eric here, Riley here, Matt here. I don't know how long we're going to have you in the pod. I think you should come back more, but like, give us something. Give us a goodbye.
Okay. So I'm obsessed with trains, possibly more than Mike.
You're one of the train autists.
I am.
Let's go.
over July 4th weekend, I took a 17-hour train ride overnight on Amtrak. It was about 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep, which was fine. I was listening to an audiobook. And 2 a.m. the train stops. And they actually, so first of all, let me back up. Trains are an aesthetically core feature of the United States. The Amtrak would stop once an hour for a 10-minute smoke break, which I thought was just amazing. Everyone got out. We shared cigarettes. I was at that point, like 10 at night. It was amazing. Fast forward to 2 a.m. The train stops. There's no station. We're not stopped at a station. And then I'm like, yo, what's going on? They're like, oh, the train ahead of us derailed. And I'm only thinking now when we're talking about infrastructure, like it didn't even bother me or seem like out of touch or like out of place that the train like derailed at night. But that probably shouldn't be happening. Like that should probably be
that's like the opening pages of Atlas Shrugged.
100%.
Just things shutting down and nobody knowing why or being shocked about it.
Yeah. So anyway, it was crazy. I didn't think it was crazy at the time, but looking back, it's crazy. We end up get started and we had another 6 hours in our journey and went fine. But we need something like Amtrak to survive. I just hope they can maybe pull off something like the Bright Line, just privatize it. Like,
well, apparently Bright Line is going from
Nevada. That's what I think.
It's going, is it San Diego to Vegas now? I think I saw.
It might be LA.
That's amazing.
I mean, let's see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if that happens.
I think it's just at this point, you have the government getting in the way of things, and then you have, anytime something starts to work, this small minority of very loud people who just get mad at I think the concept of things working. It's like doesn't correspond with their framework for the world or something, and they freak out about it, and they tend to shut a lot of things down. We got to resist that, man. That's cancer. I want cool trains. I really do. I want to be able to ride directly from San Francisco to New York.
Yes.
On a extremely fast, like futuristic type train that has a sleep-in car and a bar cart, and like I'm like journaling over a Manhattan as I pass through the mountains, and like there's some like sort of mysterious, sultry strangers in the corner smoking a cigarette. Like that's the future that I want, and that I deserve. I think we all deserve it. We're gonna fight for it. We're going to see you back here next week. Maybe we'll talk about trains again. Maybe not. Yes. I don't know. Maybe Biden will be out of the office out of the race by then. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Subscribe or die. Just subscribe. Later.